So let's talk about baby-led feeding. So I want to break this down for you. What does this mean, and what is the difference between baby-led feeding and baby-led weaning that you might see all over Instagram and social media? So while you may have seen on Instagram images and videos of babies eating like strips of steak or whole cooked asparagus and wondered, I thought babies needed to start purees. Well, no, babies can go to straight to whole and soft table foods if they have displayed the developmental signs of readiness, which we talked about in the previous video. So you can check out the 2 readiness videos to see that. But I think that the term baby-led weaning has kind of been hijacked a little by extremes on social media who say that it's bad to feed your babies purees, and that's just not true. So we're going to talk here about baby-led feeding because I think this is more of a descriptive term. So by baby-led feeding, I mean allowing baby to feed himself or herself and listening to baby's cues. So paying attention to baby's hunger and fullness signals. So how can you feed baby-led style? So here's a couple practical tips that you can implement today if you're starting solids with your babies. So you want to hand the food to your baby or place it on the tray for them to pick it up. Don't place the food into baby's mouth because that can be a choking hazard, or don't directly spoon feed them. So this goes again for both purees on a spoon and for table food. Allow the baby to put the food in their mouth or use the spoon to put the food in their mouth on their own. For baby-led feeding, we recommend minimizing distraction like TV or toys at the table, both for the parent and for the child. This encourages baby to focus on the experience of eating, and minimizing distraction is going to encourage you as the parent to focus on baby's cues so you can really learn what they're telling you, if they're telling you they're hungry or if they're telling you that they're done eating. Baby-led feeding involves ending the meal when baby says they're all done, and we're going to talk about using signs for feeding in a later video. Baby-led feeding involves making sure there's plenty of time to eat. You want to leave baby plenty of time to explore the food and eat at their own pace, because food is more about just getting nutrients in their mouth. It's also about exploring, and it's a learning experience. So rushing baby only teaches them to not listen to their cues, which is exactly what we want to avoid. So other things I recommend as part of baby-led feeding are baby eating what the family eats, of course with modifications to make it safe. Baby eating with the family at meal times as much as possible. I know this isn't always possible, but as often as you can. And because this is important because food is about more than just nutrients, it's an experience. And when we introduce baby to solids, we also want to introduce them to the social experience of eating and family meals. So let's talk about how to listen to baby's cues. So it's especially important here to not force baby to eat when they aren't hungry. This is why spoon feeding can be so challenging when it comes to respecting baby's hunger cues. It can be difficult to tell when baby isn't interested, and so many parents often feed past satiety using spoon feeding. So they might just feed until the jar is empty because they believe that's what the proper serving size is. So spoon feeding is not an ideal way to feed your baby, but there are some circumstances where it is appropriate. So you can also listen to baby's cues by paying attention to the signs that baby is full. So these include turning their head away from the food. So if you're trying to hand something to them or you are trying to spoon feed them and they turn their head away, that's a sign that they're full. Pursing their lips and not opening their mouth for any food, as well as throwing or smearing food. So we want baby to play with the food, we want baby to experience the food. Making a mess can be really good, but anytime we start to see tons of throwing off the tray, oftentimes that indicates that baby is done with the meal. Sign that baby still wants to eat includes grabbing or reaching for the food or the spoon, putting obviously food into their mouth, or smacking their lips like that when they see a food on their tray or their plate. So if you feel like you need to distract your baby or surprise them with the food, so this would be like the airplane method, you know, the spoon is the airplane and you're distracting them with the movement of the spoon and you stick it into their mouth. That's a method of distracting baby to feed them. And so this is not an ideal way to feed them, because if you need to distract them to feed them, then they're either not hungry or they don't want to be fed, or they need to be fed in a less distracting setting, or for even younger babies, maybe they're not even ready for food to begin with. So last thing I want to say here when it comes to listening to baby's cues is don't take a bad face or like a scrunched up face as a rejection or a meaning that they don't like the food. Babies often make funny faces when they eat a food. It's just new to them and sometimes surprising, and so that's the reason for the funny face. So another common question I get when we're talking about baby-led feeding is, what if my baby never seems hungry? So I'm going to give you a couple approaches here. First and foremost, don't put whole pieces of food into their mouth. That is a choking hazard. So if your baby does not seem hungry, don't force them to eat. If you do choose to spoon feed your baby directly, this can obviously help increase their intake, but it also can contribute to feeding baby when they're not ready, feeding them past fullness, and it can cause a negative association or frustration with food. So if you choose to spoon feed your baby, just know that there are some possible negative outcomes with that. If your baby doesn't seem hungry, model eating in front of them. Show them that eating is fun and exciting because baby wants to do what you do. So if you eat in front of them a lot, that's really going to help increase their desire to eat some food. Put your baby in the high chair at the table anyways. Get them into the routine and the process of eating, but do take them down if they get frustrated. We still want the high chair to be a good and a fun place to be. If your baby doesn't seem into the food, offer food in smaller amounts. So you could be offering a too large of amount, and that could be overwhelming to the baby. So when I say offer small amounts, I'm talking like 1 spoonful on their tray, and that's it, of pureed pumpkin, or 1 soft cooked piece of broccoli, instead of an entire plate full or a tray full. You can always serve more if they finish what you've put on their plate, and if you serve small amounts, it's less overwhelming. And finally, think about when you offered your last milk feeding. So for babies 6 to 9 months, I typically recommend doing a milk feeding before offering food. You could, however, start giving a little bit more time in between the milk feeding and the solid food feeding. So for example, if you feed right upon waking, give them 30 minutes to digest and not be so milk drunk before you give them their solid food, and they may be more willing to try and eat a little bit more if they've had just a little bit of time in between their last milk feeding. So the last common question I get a lot when it comes to baby-led feeding is, what if my baby doesn't eat? Okay, so there are a couple routes here that we're going to discuss. So first, are they playing with the food? Are they touching the food? Are they interacting with the food? But not much is getting swallowed? This is okay. This is really common. Baby is still learning. Just like we don't expect your baby to start walking immediately once they learn to stand, we can't assume that they're going to be efficient eaters immediately right when you make the decision to start serving them the food. So in this situation, you have a couple options here. First, you could spoon feed them if you want. You're the parent and it is your right to make an informed decision for your baby. It is up to you to make that decision. I just want you to make an informed decision of the negatives and the benefits. So the benefit would be getting more food into your baby, and a potential negative outcome would be causing a negative association with that spoon feeding if they're not ready. So if your baby doesn't eat a ton of foods, you should always be prioritizing iron-rich foods. So check out the iron video where I'll talk about how to prioritize iron-rich foods, what are iron-rich foods, etc. So prioritizing iron-rich foods is going to be really important if your baby isn't eating a ton at the onset of starting solids. You can also consider giving them an easier to eat food. So like a puree on a spoon, for example, and a whole piece of food. So you're giving them a more challenging option like a soft cooked broccoli, and then giving them a puree on the spoon like our canned pumpkin example gives them an option of an easier to eat food, which would be the pureed canned pumpkin. So if your baby isn't eating a ton of food, you'll also want to pay attention to their weight. So if they're gaining weight, this is a great sign. Keep an eye on this and reach out to your pediatrician or pediatric dietitian if you're concerned that they're not gaining weight or losing. Most offices will allow you to come in for free to do a quick weight check on baby if you're concerned and just want to check in on that without making an appointment. But call your office just to make sure before I send you in there. And last but not least, if you're concerned about their iron status and you're also prioritizing the iron-rich food, you do have the right to request an anemia screen, which anemia is caused by iron deficiency, at their 9-month appointment. It's typically done at 12-month appointments, so you could either request to have an additional screen at 9 months in addition to the regular 12-month screen, you can request to have it moved up from 12 months to 9 months. You, as the parent, have the right to request whatever you think is appropriate at a pediatrician's visit, and then you can make a shared decision with your doctor about if they think it's appropriate as well. So in this video, we talked about what is baby-led feeding, how can I feed baby-led style, how to listen to baby's cues, what to do if your baby doesn't seem hungry, and what to do if your baby doesn't seem like they're eating a lot of food. So scroll back to those questions if you want to review them. I'm going to put a summary here in the video for them as well, but thanks for watching.